I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
The crown lunch was supposed to project unity. Instead, one furious sentence shattered the room. Catherine sat frozen as Camilla's voice cut across the table, her composure collapsing until tears filled her eyes. Then Princess Anne moved. Her chair scraped backward, conversations died instantly, and the king's sister brought the entire gathering to a halt. What followed was not simply an awkward royal disagreement. It exposed a fracture the family had been desperately trying to contain. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles gathered the family at Windsor, believing the lunch could settle difficult questions quietly. The Crown Lunch, a private working meal where senior royals discussed duties away from public attention, was meant to keep disagreement behind palace walls. William sat near Catherine, while Anne watched across the table. Camilla entered tense, and the king knew decisions about future responsibilities had become painfully sensitive. Camilla suddenly accused Catherine of undermining her position and influencing William against decisions she believed were already approved. Catherine did not answer. She lowered her eyes, gripped the table, and tried to hold herself together. But the queen consort kept pressing, demanding to know why she seemed to challenge arrangements whenever the future king was involved. Catherine's silence finally broke under the accusation, and tears filled her eyes. Anne saw the change immediately. The Princess Royal, a title traditionally given to the monarch's eldest daughter, pushed her chair backward and stood. "Enough," she said, ending the exchange with a force that stunned the table. Camilla stared at her in disbelief. She had expected Charles to control the conversation, not his sister. Yet Anne did not retreat, and the king did not tell her to sit down. William remained silent, but his face hardened as he looked toward Camilla. He moved closer when Catherine rose, wiped her cheek, and tried to leave. Charles still said nothing. That silence mattered, because the monarch alone could have restarted the meal, defended his wife, or closed the argument differently in front of the family. Instead, he allowed Anne's intervention to stand. Catherine was almost at the doorway when Camilla spoke again. Her final remark was quieter, but far more dangerous. She suggested William and his wife were acting as though the next reign had already begun. Anne stopped. She turned back slowly. William froze beside Catherine, and Charles finally lifted his eyes. Because beneath Camilla's outburst was a much older struggle over loyalty, influence, and Catherine's growing place beside the future king. And every person at that table knew exactly how dangerous that struggle had become. To understand why one royal lunch could collapse so quickly, you have to understand the three women at its center. Catherine had spent years mastering restraint. Camilla had fought for decades to secure her place beside the king. Anne had built her reputation around duty rather than popularity. None of them entered that room looking for surrender. And when their private fears collided, titles suddenly mattered far less than loyalty, pride, and the future of the crown. Catherine left the dining room carrying more than embarrassment. Every dispute around her could touch William, their children, and the image of the monarchy they may one day inherit. The crown, meaning the institution of monarchy rather than the person wearing it, depended on continuity and trust. She understood that one accusation could be repeated until it became a story larger than the truth. William found her later and asked what had hurt most. Catherine answered quietly that it was not Camilla's raised voice at all. It was the suggestion that she had deliberately worked against Charles in front of the family. The prince listened without interrupting, and she admitted that being treated as a threat to the king felt more painful than being criticized personally. Camilla, meanwhile, refused to accept that the collapse belonged to her alone. She told Charles in conversation that Catherine's silence during recent decisions had begun to feel like opposition. The queen consort believed her own place beside the monarch had been hard-won, and the younger woman's growing influence around William now felt like a challenge she could no longer ignore. Anne carried a different burden. She had heard language like this before. The Princess Royal, the traditional title given to the sovereign's eldest daughter, had witnessed an earlier confrontation built around the same resentment. When she found Catherine alone, she sat beside her without aids and told her that tears were not something she needed to apologize for. Catherine looked at her, surprised by the tenderness, and Anne stayed. William entered soon after and asked the question hanging over everything. Was this planned? Anne did not answer at once. That hesitation changed the room. The future king realized his aunt knew something Catherine did not, and Catherine understood that the lunch may have been the second chapter of a conflict already in motion. Anne finally explained that the hostility traced back to a private Windsor meeting days earlier, where Catherine had refused a demand Camilla expected her to obey. And once that earlier meeting is uncovered, the crown lunch stops looking like a spontaneous loss of temper and begins to look like the inevitable explosion of a conflict nobody had resolved. The real beginning came days before anyone cried at the lunch table. Behind a closed Windsor door, Catherine was handed a demand she had not expected, and Camilla expected her to accept without resistance. William was absent. Charles hesitated. Anne watched every expression change. What happened in that private meeting lasted only minutes, but it created the wound that reopened at lunch. By the time everyone sat down together again, the argument had never truly ended. Camilla had called for a private Windsor planning meeting 3 days before the lunch. She told Catherine that she should withdraw from leading an upcoming crown charitable reception and allow the Queen to take sole senior precedence. A crown charitable reception is an official royal event held in support of public causes, where senior family members represent the monarchy. Catherine understood immediately why the request mattered. Stepping back would not simply change a schedule. It would signal who carried authority. Catherine did not raise her voice. She looked toward Charles and calmly asked whether the instruction had come directly from him. The king hesitated. That pause was enough. Camilla stiffened because she heard the question as a challenge to her standing, while Catherine believed she was asking for basic clarity before surrendering a responsibility already assigned to her. Anne stepped in before the disagreement could sharpen further. She warned that family rank should not be turned into a weapon during routine decisions. The Princess Royal, the title traditionally held by the monarch's eldest daughter, spoke carefully but firmly. Camilla kept her anger controlled, yet Anne could see that the interruption had landed badly. Charles still did not confirm the demand. Catherine finally said she would not withdraw unless the king himself made the decision. She was not defiant. She was precise. Charles ended the meeting without ordering her to step aside, and she believed the matter had been settled. Camilla saw something completely different. To her, the younger woman had questioned her authority in front of the monarch and walked away without consequence. Camilla stopped Catherine at the doorway. Her voice dropped. "Do not mistake patience for permission." Catherine turned, absorbed the warning, and refused to answer in anger. Then she walked away. Anne watched the exchange closely, and she remembered every word. Camilla spoke again after Catherine had gone. In that private conversation, she told Charles that William's household was beginning to operate as though the next reign had already started. Anne heard it clearly. The king ended the discussion without granting the original demand, but the resentment remained alive. 3 days later, that resentment returned at the crown lunch. The private warning at Windsor had planted the fuse. At lunch, Camilla lit it, and now Anne was about to confront her face-to-face with the entire family watching. Catherine was almost through the doorway when Camilla spoke again. That was the moment Anne stopped walking. She turned slowly, looked directly across the room, and abandoned every polite escape the family had left. No aides stepped between them. No staff member dared interrupt. William remained beside Catherine while Charles watched from the table. Then Anne addressed Camilla directly, and a tense family dispute became an unmistakable confrontation over how far royal authority could be pushed. Anne made her reason clear. She had stopped the lunch because Catherine had been pushed beyond disagreement and into humiliation during a gathering meant to settle responsibilities calmly. The Princess Royal, the title traditionally given to the sovereign's eldest daughter, was not claiming control over the family. She was drawing a boundary. Charles remained seated, and his silence immediately changed the balance, because he did not rush to defend Camilla. Camilla turned toward Anne and told her she had no right to police a conversation between senior members of the family. The Queen Consort spoke with anger now, no longer hiding behind careful language. Anne answered that she would step in whenever cruelty was being disguised as duty. She did not shout. That restraint made the rebuke cut deeper, and Camilla understood that everyone in the room had heard it. Catherine reached for William and quietly asked him not to make the confrontation worse. He listened, but the prince refused to leave. His concern had started with her tears, yet Anne's next words changed everything. In a direct account of the Windsor meeting, she told him that Camilla had described his household as behaving as though Charles's reign were already ending. Catherine looked toward him immediately. He had never heard that accusation before. William's anger shifted. This was no longer only about how Catherine had been treated. It was about loyalty to his father, and the suggestion that his own family was quietly preparing to replace him. He asked Anne whether she was certain. She answered without hesitation that she had been present when the words were spoken, and Charles could confirm the conversation had taken place. Camilla stepped toward Anne and insisted the meaning had been distorted. She argued that she had spoken about growing independence, not betrayal. Anne did not move. She calmly repeated what she had heard and refused to soften it. Catherine remained near the doorway, William beside her, while Charles finally pushed back his chair and stood. The room expected the king to silence his sister. Charles looked directly at Camilla instead. "Did you say it?" With Charles now demanding an answer, the argument is no longer about a wounded lunch. It becomes a test of who the king believes, who he protects, and who truly controls the next decision. Charles did not shout. That made the moment heavier. Standing at the end of the unfinished table, he asked Camilla to answer one question, and refused every attempt to redirect it toward Catherine. The room that had been filled with anger suddenly became painfully quiet. Anne had forced the dispute into the open, but only the king could decide what happened next. And when he finally spoke, his decision changed the meaning of everything that had occurred. Charles held the authority Anne could not. She had stopped the gathering through force of conviction, but the monarch alone could decide whether the lunch resumed and how the dispute would be handled. He separated royal responsibilities from personal accusations, making clear that disagreements over duties were one matter, and attacking Catherine's loyalty was another. That distinction mattered because it removed the excuse that everything said had simply been part of official business. Camilla finally answered. She admitted that she had been worried about William and Catherine becoming increasingly independent, but she denied trying to insult Charles or suggest that his reign was already being pushed aside. The Queen Consort insisted that her concern was about balance inside the family, yet the king did not interrupt. He listened, then looked toward Catherine, whose silence now carried more weight than any argument. Charles understood what had happened to her. The princess had been pulled into a fear about succession she had not created, and forced to defend herself against motives she had never claimed. Succession, the legal order determining who inherits the throne, carried enormous emotional weight, because every discussion about William's future could easily be mistaken for impatience with the present king. Catherine had become trapped inside that tension. Then Charles made the revelation that changed everything. He confirmed directly, in front of those present, that he had never ordered Catherine to surrender the charitable reception during the earlier Windsor meeting. That request had come from Camilla herself. Anne did not react dramatically, but William's expression hardened. Catherine finally had confirmation that her refusal had not been disobedience. Charles ended the matter with quiet force. The lunch would not resume. No changes to Catherine's responsibilities would be discussed until everyone had calmed down, and Anne's decision to stop the gathering would stand. Camilla slowly sat while the others remained on their feet. For the first time, she looked isolated. Charles removed his glasses, set them beside his untouched plate, and told her they would speak privately. William said nothing, but his silence had changed. And as the doors close behind the abandoned gathering, the most dangerous consequences begin not with another shout, but with William deciding what he will no longer tolerate. Within minutes, the crown lunch had become an empty room filled with unfinished plates and unanswered questions. But outside it, the family was dividing into smaller conversations. Catherine wanted distance. William wanted accountability. Camilla wanted Charles to understand why she had reacted so fiercely. Anne wanted one thing above all: an end to the pressure being placed on the Princess of Wales. The lunch was over, yet its consequences were only beginning to take shape behind separate closed doors. William led Catherine away and made one decision immediately. She would not attend another private family discussion that day. The Prince of Wales, the title held by the monarch's direct heir, understood why distance mattered. If she returned too quickly, the argument could become another test of endurance. Catherine admitted she feared the tears would be seen as weakness. William rejected that completely. He told her that remaining composed through repeated accusations had already demanded more restraint than anyone should have expected. Anne stayed behind with Charles because she wanted no confusion about why she had stopped the meal. She told the king that allowing the confrontation to continue would have rewarded humiliation rather than solved a disagreement. The Princess Royal did not ask him to punish Camilla. She asked him to recognize that a boundary had been crossed, and Charles listened carefully because the dispute was now affecting both family trust and the working relationship between two royal households. Camilla confronted Charles soon afterward. She told him Anne had made her appear powerless in front of William and Catherine, especially at a moment when authority already felt fragile. The Queen Consort expected sympathy. Instead, the monarch answered that the damage came from the outburst itself, not from his sister ending it. Camilla pushed back, but he refused to change that judgment. William then made his own boundary clear in a private conversation with Charles. Any future discussion affecting Catherine's duties would include him whenever decisions touched their household directly. The king agreed. It sounded procedural, but Camilla understood the meaning immediately. The informal path that had allowed her to press Catherine alone was closing. Camilla remained behind after Charles left. She stared at the chair across from her, pushed an untouched cup away, and finally understood the cost. The confrontation had not strengthened her influence. It had narrowed it. For the first time that day, anger gave way to something colder: uncertainty. Catherine could have withdrawn after that. Instead, she made an unexpected choice. Later that evening, she asked to speak with Anne alone, without William, Charles, or aides. After hours of others speaking for her, Catherine is finally ready to speak for herself. And what she tells Anne changes the direction of the entire crisis. By evening, the shouting had disappeared, but Catherine had not forgotten a single word. She asked for Anne alone. No aides, no husbands, no palace officials to soften what had happened. The two women sat together with the weight of the day between them, and Catherine finally said what she had refused to say at lunch. She was hurt, yes, but she was finished allowing peace inside the family to depend upon her remaining silent whenever a boundary was crossed. Catherine thanked Anne for stopping the lunch, but admitted something more difficult. Part of her had wanted the argument to pass without intervention. She had spent years believing restraint protected the family from larger damage. The Princess Royal, the title traditionally given to the monarch's eldest daughter, listened carefully. Anne told her restraint only worked when other people respected it. If silence was treated as permission, then silence stopped protecting anyone. Catherine then explained why Camilla's accusation had cut so deeply. She could survive criticism. What she could not accept was the suggestion that standing beside William somehow meant turning against Charles. The princess feared being cast as a rival to the king when she had spent years trying to support the existing reign. Anne understood the danger immediately. Once loyalty itself became the accusation, every future decision could be twisted into evidence against her. Anne leaned closer and told Catherine she did not need to become combative. She did not need to answer anger with anger. But she could no longer absorb every insult simply to spare everyone else discomfort. Catherine listened, then made the decision that changed the crisis. She would lead the charitable reception as planned. The royal engagement, an official event carried out on behalf of the monarchy, mattered because withdrawing now would make Camilla's outburst look powerful enough to change her duties. Catherine made another choice. She would not demand punishment for Camilla. Instead, she wanted one clear rule. Disagreements involving her responsibilities must be addressed privately, directly, and without personal attacks. Anne accepted that immediately, because the goal had never been revenge. It had been a boundary. Catherine reached for Anne's hand and admitted that hearing the lunch stopped had meant more than she could explain. For once, someone had drawn the line before she was expected to endure everything quietly. Anne squeezed her hand and told her that strength did not always mean staying silent. By morning, that private decision had consequences. Catherine would appear publicly, Anne would stand beside her, and William would remain close. Catherine has chosen neither revenge nor retreat. But when the family steps back into public view, the world begins reading the smallest gestures as evidence of what happened behind those Windsor doors. The palace could contain the argument, but it could not contain the meaning people attached to what came next. By the following morning, the abandoned crown lunch had become the royal story everyone was discussing. Yet the defining public moment was not a statement. It was Catherine, arriving composed, Anne greeting her warmly, and William standing close beside them. After a day defined by tears and confrontation, that single grouping became the image through which the outside world understood the fracture. Catherine knew every expression would be examined. Palace staff issued a brief statement calling the lunch a private family matter and confirming that scheduled duties would continue unchanged. A royal engagement, meaning an official public duty carried out on behalf of the monarchy, was more than a diary entry now. It had become proof that the family would keep working despite the damage behind closed doors. William quietly asked Catherine whether she wanted to cancel. The prince understood that one strained expression could be turned into a headline, and he did not want the previous day's pain dragged into public view. Catherine refused. She told him that stepping back would allow the worst moment of the lunch to define her. William accepted her answer and stayed close as she moved forward. The public reaction came quickly. A fictional morning front page carried the banner, "The Lunch That Stopped the Palace," placing Anne's intervention and Catherine's tears at the center of national attention. Outside Windsor Castle, a gathered crowd reacted as Catherine's car passed. Instead of shouting accusations, several people called her name and applauded. She briefly acknowledged them, and the moment spread as a symbol of support. For Catherine, that response mattered, because silence outside Windsor could have felt devastating. Camilla attended another engagement separately and maintained her composure. The Queen Consort said nothing about the dispute, but the absence of any appearance beside Catherine made the distance impossible to ignore. Commentary shifted toward Anne, whose decision to halt the meal was now being read as unusually direct protection of the future queen. Anne later joined Catherine at the charitable reception Camilla had wanted reassigned. The Princess Royal never mentioned the argument, yet her presence carried its own message. Catherine had not been removed. She had not retreated. William watched from nearby, understanding that the question of public duty had been settled. Charles knew symbolism was not enough. The king now called Catherine, Anne, and Camilla together for one final private meeting. The monarchy had shown the public that duty would continue. Now, behind closed doors, the people who caused the rupture had to decide whether dignity could survive where trust had been damaged. There would be no second explosion. When Charles brought the three women together again, nobody needed reminding of what the crown lunch had cost them. Catherine had cried. Camilla had lost control. Anne had crossed the room and stopped an entire gathering rather than watch the humiliation continue. But the final meeting was not about deciding who had won. It was about something harder, whether a family built around duty could acknowledge harm, establish boundaries, and walk away without pretending nothing had happened. Charles opened the private meeting with one rule. Disagreements over royal duties could continue, but personal accusations inside family gatherings would not. The king made clear that Catherine would keep her role at the charitable reception, and William would now be included whenever decisions affected their household. A royal household is the working team and family structure helping senior royals perform public duties, so this change placed a firm boundary around how those decisions would be handled. Camilla did not fight the decision. She admitted that her frustration over Catherine's growing prominence had become personal, and the queen consort acknowledged that seeing her in tears had shown how far the argument had gone. She did not excuse the outburst. Catherine listened, but she refused to pretend the hurt had vanished. She told Camilla that respect could never mean staying silent while being diminished. Anne spoke next, and she offered no apology for halting the lunch. The Princess Royal said protecting the crown meant stopping a gathering before resentment could hide behind ceremony and polite smiles. Charles agreed. The monarch's judgment was not exile, punishment, or public humiliation. It was boundaries. Personal rivalry would no longer be allowed to control royal duty. Catherine rose first when the meeting ended. Camilla paused before apologizing to her directly. The princess accepted the apology without warmth, but she accepted it. Anne watched the two women leave separately and felt something settle. Harmony had not magically returned, yet the truth had been acknowledged, and that mattered more than pretending the fracture had never existed. The crown lunch became a turning point for them all. Catherine no longer had to carry discomfort in silence. Camilla confronted the cost of turning insecurity into confrontation. Anne proved that loyalty requires interruption rather than obedience. And Charles showed that unity cannot survive through appearances alone. The table was cleared, the tears dried, and the family returned to duty. But nobody left Windsor unchanged. This time, the crown preserved its unity not by hiding the fracture, but by confronting it. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.